Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us virtually. And it's been a good couple of weeks. It's been a lot of fun watching Wake Forest golfers perform at Augusta National. So certainly a shout out to Will. Incredible job at his first Masters. And Amelia, what she did there as well, finishing the runner-up in the women's amateur. And, that's the neat thing at Wake Forest. I certainly met Will, and I've gotten to know, Amelia during her time here, and, both impressive people and doing a great job of representing Wake Forest on the biggest stage there is in their respective sports, men's and women's golf. So we're really proud of them. We had a good scrimmage on Saturday. Thanks to our band and our cheer squad for being there, trying to create a little bit of a game atmosphere for our younger guys. And we got good work in. We continue to have productive practices, continue to stay healthy, which is just as critical. And we've got 2 left. So we'll go tomorrow and we'll work some situations tomorrow. And then we'll head down to the stadium on Saturday and kind of have a practice and a, scrimmage some of the younger guys again for the last practice. And then we'll start turning our attention to the summer. So I'm about to be in a bad mood here. As you guys know, I love the spring. I wish we could do this for 2 months or 3 months, but we got practices 14 and 15 coming up, and then we'll call it a wrap and then start back into our summer training and have our guys finish up with finals and end of the year papers and all the things that go into being a Wake Forest student athlete. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Dave, I got to thinking about spring practice, and usually it's a little chillier out because you guys do, earlier in the spring. Does it help when there's some humidity and stuff like that? Because it kind of prepares you a little bit for August in some respect. Is it a little bit better having it later like this?
I don't know, John. I think, when we get back in January and February, our biggest focus is on getting our guys stronger. That is, and especially having the whole year without being in the weight room. And so I don't get as worried about conditioning levels in March and April. To me, after we're done with this, the transition will go into getting stronger again. And then there's a period there in late June, July, that the strength coaches and the conditioning coaches really start preparing the guys to what we would call a game week load. So the amount of distance, the speeds, the change of direction that mimics a game week. And so we are much less concerned with that in spring than we are in the summer. The humidity work, we need it. I just don't know how much having that in early April is going to help you in August and September.
Even in the past, that 15th practice has been the install for the week 1. Is there any reason why that's not the case this year?
We're kind of doing that with tomorrow's practice. So we'll spend a little bit of time on some of the things that we're going to see schematically that are different, that our offense and defenses don't present to each other. So, it's the nature of spring practice everywhere. Our offense gets so used to going against our defense, and our defense gets so used to going against our offense, that I always like taking that one practice and just showing some different things. And so we're going to take some time tomorrow and a little bit of time on Saturday and spend some times that we'll see the first couple of weeks of the season that our offense and defenses don't present to each other during spring football.
I know you still got 2 left, so this answer could change in the next 2 practices, but if you had to evaluate it now, who are the biggest risers? Who are the guys who have taken the most advantage of the spring and kind of really stepped up and taken their next steps?
I could go, I'll kind of go positionally side of the ball. Certainly Justice Ellison and Christian Turner and Quentin Cooley and Amani Marshall, all those other running backs, other than, we've always kind of been a two-headed monster in the backfield. Whether it was Caden Carney and Matt Colburn, or, Cade and Kenneth, Cade and Christian and Kenneth. We got Christian back, and Justice Ellison has taken another step. Christian Turner from Michigan is a very, very good football player. And seeing Quentin Cooley and Amani Marshall make steps as well is encouraging. Certainly at receiver, to me, the two guys that have really jumped out is Donald Stewart and Jamal Banks. Those guys are markedly different than they were last fall. I mean, both those guys were here for the first time. We're just getting their feet wet with the offense, their comprehension of what we're doing, the speed at which they're playing with. They're processing less, thinking less, reacting faster. That's very exciting. On the offensive line, that next group of guys, Devontae Gordon, George Sell, Luke Pettibone, have all making really, really nice steps. Christian Forbes, CJ Elmanas. I mean, we're going to have depth on the O-line. Again, and that's one of the advantages of getting Javionte Nash better. And then you got, 3 fifth-year seniors who are now fifth-year juniors with Zach Tom, Sean McGinn, and Loic Naya. We've bought another year of development with some of those younger players. Defensively, Jasheen Davis, to me, is a guy that every practice, he's going to be able to help us next year. To me, when you're redshirt guys or their freshman year, it's always a matter of, okay, with the good players, is it year 2 or year 3? Jasheen Davis, it's going to be year 2. At linebacker, I think Jalen Hudson has had a really good spring. He is playing faster, very similar to what I said about the receivers. We get smart guys at Wake Forest. Jamal Banks and Donald Stewart and Jalen Hudson are really, really smart guys. And sometimes those smart guys, they process, and the processing slows them down. And there's a certain point where it starts to click, that they now understand it. They play faster, they play quicker, they're reacting better. We're starting to see that with Jalen. And certainly Chase Jones is healthy now. And, we have Luke and we have Ryan Smenda, but seeing Chase Jones and Jalen make that progress is exciting. The 2 young corners continue to get better, Kalen Carson and Gavin Holmes. And then JJ Roberts is a safety that, to me, has, like some of those other guys, like a Justin Ellison or Jamal Banks, you're seeing him start to take that step. And those, to me, are the plus ones, that you have the guys that are back from last year. If you look at who played for us, we're really only missing 2 offense and defensive players that were regular players, and that's Boogie and Jaquez. And so you got everybody else back other than Jack Crane, who we're going to miss. And now you have all these risers that, whatever that line is of not being quite ready to be unplayable, those guys are all starting to take that jump past that line, which is exciting. And it's exciting not only for the 21 season, but it's exciting for the 22 and 23 season. You redshirt these guys and you hope they're hits. And after that first year, you're not always sure. And then by year 2 and 3, some of them come into their own and some of them don't make that step. The number of players that are making that step is really exciting.
Dave, do you look at many of those mock drafts to see about Boogie? Do you pay attention to all those? There's about 100 mock drafts. Do you look at those at all?
Not really. I mean, some of the big ones, I'm on Twitter with and I follow our players, and whether it's Boogie or some of our guys retweeting something about Boogie, those are the things that'll show up on my timeline.
What do you think is his best attribute? Is it his speed around the edge? Is that going to be his kind of calling card?
I mean, John, he's a guy that's 6'3.5", 6'4", 274 pounds, and he ran a sub 4.6 40. That's just not a normal skill set. And then you can say, okay, he's got the size, he's got the speed. And then, there's always guys, and in college recruiting, we call them camp guys, that they go to camp and they do all the change of direction drills well, and they're fast and they're strong, but then you put on the film and they're not productive. That's not the case with Boogie. He has all those measurables, and then you put on the tape and he's productive. I mean, how many consecutive games did he have a TFL? That's not an accident. You don't just end up with that many TFLs. I mean, maybe now and then you can get a player and you run a twist and he comes free. His consistent production for us the last 3 years shows up on film. And, this year he might've played a little heavy. And so he lost some weight. And I think he showed that athleticism that people saw in pro day, and he probably showed a little bit more the year before. But again, I just think that combination of speed, size, position flexibility, he's going to make somebody a really good player. He's going to be a really good player for someone.
Dave, was there any thought of opening up for the public on Saturday? Or because I was on vacation last week, so I didn't hear anything. Was there any thought of doing that?
Not really. I just think we've been on this road so long. We've been so cautious, and I don't think we want to jeopardize any way that the school views how, we're hoping that we'll be able to open up the stadium. And I just think we're close to hopefully the end of you can start seeing, the end of the tunnel. And we don't want to do anything that puts people at risk. And it's an abundance of caution, but we're one of the few teams in the ACC that I think got through spring practice without having to take a break. And it's because we've been closed, we've been cautious, we've been careful. To me, the benefit of opening it up doesn't outweigh the potential negatives of if we'd have an outbreak, the way people could view next season. So let's get safe, let's get to the end, and hopefully we'll be able to have a full stadium in September.
Dave, you talked about not having a COVID break. This will be practice number 14 tomorrow for you guys. How's your team holding up through that grind? And then from a scheduling perspective, is there anything that you'll take from this year's spring camp and kind of transplant it moving forward in terms of the timing or anything that you all did differently?
Well, again, Les, we pushed things back for really 2 reasons. Number one was just the length of last season. If you remember, we brought our players back July 1st. And because we played in a late December bowl game, we went 6 straight months without our kids being able to go home and see their parents for a weekend. So that was just such a long stretch. And I thought there was a burnout and a fatigue involved, that if we started spring too early, football is one of those sports that I think once our players get away from it, they're then anxious to do it again. And I didn't want to run the risk of starting too soon. I really felt that we needed to get in the weight room and get stronger. And then the other thing is, because it's still a dead period, typically our coaches are allowed to go on the road April 15th. And because it was dead, part of our reason for starting late February, early March has always been to be finished by April 15th. So our coaches could get in the road and evaluate the next recruiting class. And because of the dead period and the inability to get out, there was no reason to finish early. So we'll see how next season goes. And we'll see how next season finishes. But I like starting a little bit later. But I still think that from a recruiting standpoint, you still want to be able to be one of the first schools in to see your top players.
Dave, yesterday I saw Garrison Tubbs, a soccer player. He was getting vaccinated up at the fairgrounds. How are those stats going for you guys? I mean, are most of the players all vaccinated, or have got one or maybe their second shots, or how are those stats doing?
I think, within 2 weeks, I think we'll be about 60% or so. Now, some of the players who had COVID are a little bit reluctant to get it, just because I think it appears that if you get it right after you get COVID, the vaccine can make you a little sicker. And again, we're at a point right now that we're recommending it. We're not making it mandatory, but over half of our players right now have got at least one of the 2 shots. And I want to say about a third of our football team is probably fully vaccinated right now. So, again, certain schools are starting to make it mandatory. We're not there yet, but it seems like that trend is starting.
Hey, Dave, Ralph Russo from the Associated Press. I wanted to jump in with something. First of all, good to see you.
Good to see you. You're in Brooklyn?
I'm in Brooklyn. Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So if you hear a little noise in the background, there's, as always, some work being done outside our window. That's what it is. If you hear a jackhammer, that's what it is. So we're going to have some new transfer rules coming up. It's not surprising. We've known we're heading toward this, one-time exception. Everybody's eligible after the first time. But now it's going to finally be here. As a coach whose program doesn't, I think it's fair to say doesn't go too deep into transfers, generally speaking, how have you thought of, well, how am I going to maybe change some things around? Where do I have to maybe restructure to A, take advantage of the fact that more kids are transferring, and also B, to make sure that I manage my roster in a way where I don't have a ton of kids leaving? Like how do you, do you sit down with them more and sort of say like, hey, like where's your head on this?
Well, I mean, that's we could go the next hour on this one, Ralph.
Okay.
So there's a lot of different elements to your question, and I'll kind of handle them piece by piece. And then if I miss anything, you can certainly follow up. So you're right. We've never been a program that's dependent on transfers. From day one, our slogan here has been recruit, retain, develop. And I think if anything, it just makes us look at our current model and probably reinforces it. That we have to provide the best experience we can for our student athletes. And we have to deliver what we promise in recruiting, so they don't want to go on the portal. And so I don't view this as, hey, the way that we run our program is going to change. I think it just makes us double down, and we got to do a better job with how we run things. I'm not sure, and Will can back me up on this, but I think right now, Ralph, we're the only program in the country that's been to 5 straight bowls with a 90% graduation rate and a 990 APR score. And so that model of recruiting players that fit Wake Forest, that stay, that graduate, and you look at the amount of players here that have blossomed in their 4th and 5th year, whether that be Boogie Basham, Justin Haran, Phil Haynes, that's our formula. And so I don't think we're suddenly going to change our formula. We're suddenly not going to start beating Alabama and Clemson and Georgia on 5-star recruits. That's just not who we are. Our program has always been based on recruiting kids and student athletes that fit our school institutionally, that fit our program character-wise, that we feel, given time in our program with development, can be competitive with the better schools in our league. And I think if you look at over the last 4 or 5 years, we're in the top third of the ACC in wins. So that model is working, and we're not going to change it. We just got to get better at it. However, I would say this, one of the things I used to say about Wake Forest is our mistakes don't leave. So if we recruited a young man who wasn't good enough to play here, he wasn't going to leave because he didn't want to give up the Wake Forest education and sit a year. And so in some ways, some of the players that weren't good enough to play for us are now leaving, which has freed up scholarships for us to recruit a Christian Turner and make our roster better. So my biggest concern, like this is going to happen, we're past the point of fighting it. I think at this point you have to embrace it because it is our new reality. But I think we just got to do a great job within our program. My biggest concern with it is just the windows of time that players can go into the portal. So let's say that we sign 25 players in a year, and suddenly, in June or July, 2 or 3 running backs decide to leave. What do? You've used your 25 scholarships. You can't sign anybody else. Even in the professional sports leagues with free agency, there's windows of times that there can be movement. And, I guess I would just like to see, that to me, there should be windows that they can do this. If a player leaves on you a week before your first game in the fall because they don't like their role, the impact it can have on your team, even from a health and safety standpoint, if you don't have people at that position, that's the challenge of this. So when it comes out, I think we just like to see, hey, you can have one-time transfers. There's freedom of movement, but you'd like there to be some type of windows of when the players could do this, just so you can react with your own team.
And if I could, just one follow-up. Again, I know you're not necessarily looking for a team with a bunch of transfers, but these players are available. There's going to be more of them than ever. Do you in any way tinker with the structure of your, I guess would be, player personnel department, whatever that looks like, and say, hey, listen, we need a couple more eyes on the portal here. Just give me a list of a couple of people that maybe would fit Wake Forest that would be a good fit here.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming through a COVID budget year, so going to our athletic director and president right now asking for a college scouting division of personnel aren't the things that are going to fly real well here. If you want to make a donation, we'll certainly name that position after you, Ralph. And I mean, Ralph, the same challenges that we have recruiting high school players in terms of our academic requirements, we have those same challenges in the transfer market. There's very few players who go in that portal that, number one, that we can get admitted. And the second challenge here is the credits that we'll accept. That, Wake Forest is a very academic school. And it's a challenging course load here. And for us to be able to accept credits from another institution, it's usually, they have to be somewhat, they have to be strenuous academic courses. So when I go into that portal and we look at those things, the percentage of players that in that portal that, number one, we can get accepted, and number two, will transfer enough credit so that they're eligible. Those are our two challenges. So again, this is where, when you look at those things, I think it just goes back to, it reinforces our initial model that we have to do a great job of recruiting high school players that fit our school, that value the degree, that football is important to, and we'll be able to add transfers now and then, yes. Is that a market that we're going to have to be dependent on to sustain success in our program? I think that would be a very iffy proposition.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks to all the reporters for letting me barge in here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to see you, Ralph. Well, I didn't say anything there that they're going to misquote me on, did I?
No, you're good, Coach.
Okay. Well, we might have some like red buzzer set up, say, hey, don't go there. So
Along those lines, Dave, is there any movement on the Casey Washington story?
there's movement, Les. We're still working on it. So we're you know, the book's not over. I'm not overly optimistic about it, but we're continuing to see what we can do to try to keep him here.
I was going to give you 1 week relief on asking that, but since the topic was right there,
No, I'd be disappointed less if he gave me that week. So, you know, there's no news to report, and I don't know if there will be before the end of the semester. So we're still in touch with him, and we're still making efforts to, you know, we'd like to keep him here. Like I said, he's a good player. He's a good person. He's a good young man. And we're going to do what we can. But at the same point, whatever he decides to do, we support him. He did nothing wrong. This is not a discipline issue or anything that he didn't do correctly.
Anything else for Coach, guys?
I was just curious, Dave, about your quarterbacks, your young quarterbacks, and kind of how that development curve has gone this spring with those guys in terms of trying to find, you know, a good number two, a pecking order, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're giving, you know, Michael and Mitch a lot of work. We're giving those guys a lot of work, and we feel really good about both of them. So they're both very good players. They're both hit